Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Tonight's story begins at the precise moment everything unraveled. There was no warning. No slow decline. Just one sentence, said too casually over dinner, and suddenly, the life he thought he had was gone. The clinking of wine glasses. The hum of polite laughter. The soft scrape of forks on ceramic. That was the soundtrack when she said it. I think, she began, grinning like this was all a performance. Being with someone who never fights back is a bit like decorating a mannequin. Sure, it looks perfect, but you know it's hollow. No one flinched. Someone actually snorted into their rose. He looked up. Everyone was smiling, everyone but him. And her. She reached for her glass like she hadn't just shattered a man in front of their closest friends. That man, her husband, sat 3 seats away, surrounded by candlelight, noise, and people who used to be his friends. The room was still. His throat burned. But no one noticed. Not even when he slowly stood up, quietly pushed back his chair, and walked out the front door without a word. He didn't take his jacket. He didn't take the dessert. He didn't take his wife. And no one followed. That was 11 days ago. She hasn't heard from him since. Not a call. Not a note. Not even a login to their shared Netflix account. She tried calling his brother, he said he hadn't seen him. She asked around at his job, they said he never returned from lunch. He was just, gone. Like fog after sunrise. Like he'd never existed. All that remained was the dinner party replaying in her head. And now? Now she's received a package in the mail. No return address. No markings. Just a small wooden box. Inside it, something that'll change everything again. But before we get there, you need to know what was hidden long before the dinner party. And why, when he left that night, he didn't just disappear. He was finished. And what he left behind, was only the beginning. When Fallon first saw the package on her porch, she thought it was a mistake. The handwriting on the label wasn't familiar, and there was no return address, just her name in shaky black ink. She wasn't expecting anything, certainly not anything so old-looking. The box was wooden, worn at the corners, with a small brass latch. It looked handmade. Delicate. And somehow, threatening. She brought it inside, turned it in her hands, then left it on the kitchen counter for hours, circling it like it might explode. That entire morning, her phone remained silent. No missed calls from Eldon. No replies to the dozen texts she'd sent him over the past week. No read receipts. He had vanished so cleanly it made her stomach turn. Eventually, curiosity, or maybe guilt, pushed her to open it. Inside was a single photograph, folded in half. And a necklace. His necklace. The one he never took off. The one he got from his mother before she passed. Fallon stared at it for a long time, her throat tightening. She had begged him to replace the frayed chain for years, even tried to throw it out once. He had nearly cried. And now it was sitting in a box on her counter, abandoned. When she unfolded the photograph, her heart stuttered. It was her. And Marshall. Taken from outside the gallery 2 weeks before the dinner party. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. Marshall's hand on her back. Her mouth near his ear. The two of them laughing. Her wedding ring barely visible on her finger. Fallon dropped into a chair, breath caught somewhere between rage and fear. She had always been careful. She hadn't even kissed Marshall, not technically. It was all just teasing. A game. Something to make her feel alive again. She never imagined Eldon would have seen them. Or worse, followed her. But that wasn't all. Beneath the necklace, at the very bottom of the box, there was a tiny note, written in the same shaky black ink as the label. It read. How long have I been hollow to you? No greeting. No signature. Just that question. And the weight of it crushed her. She tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. She called his brother again. This time, his brother hung up. She messaged their mutual friend from college, who said Eldon had sold his car. She even went to the bank to check their joint account. He had emptied it 2 days earlier. All of it. Gone. Fallon stared at the screen in the bank office while the teller, a young woman with overly cheerful eye makeup, gave her an apologetic smile. "We can look into any suspicious activity," she offered. Fallon shook her head. "It's not suspicious," she muttered. "It's personal." And then she left. That night, she sat in their bedroom alone, staring at the box on her nightstand. The same box she once imagined holding love letters or memories. Now it held a necklace, a photo, and the cold truth of what she'd done. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, is that Eldon hadn't sent that box from a hotel. He hadn't sent it from another city. He had sent it from very close by. Because Eldon never really vanished. He was watching. And she had no idea how close the next sentence was to ruining her all over again. Fallon hadn't left the house in 2 days. Her once pristine schedule, Pilates classes, Zoom meetings, Thursday night cocktails with her career girls, had crumbled beneath a suffocating weight of silence. She checked the front porch twice an hour. Not for Eldon. She knew better than to expect him to walk through that door now. No, she was waiting for something else. Another box. Another message. Something. Instead, what came was a receipt. Folded and slid under the front door like a calling card. Fallon didn't notice it until hours later. She stepped on it while heading to the kitchen for another glass of wine, barefoot, unaware. When she picked it up, her blood ran cold. It was for a hotel. A small roadside inn on the edge of town, nothing fancy, definitely not the kind of place Eldon would have picked on a whim. It was dated for that night. One night. Room 209. Paid in cash. On the back, someone had scribbled 2 words in pen. Keep talking. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just that. Fallon's hands trembled as she held the receipt, her mind racing through every possibility. Was it Eldon? Was it someone else? Was she being watched? Was this a warning or an invitation? She called Marshall. He didn't answer. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. The last time she'd spoken to him was 3 days earlier. He'd told her to lay low. That things were getting too weird. He sounded distant, like he'd already started putting emotional distance between them. And now? Gone. Just like Eldon. Fallon stared at the receipt for a long time before finally making a decision she hadn't even considered before. She drove to the hotel. It was past 9 p.m. when she pulled into the gravel parking lot, headlights bouncing off faded siding and an old neon sign that flickered more than it glowed. The place looked abandoned. One light was on in the office. The rest of the building was dark, except for a single lamp in the window of room 209. She parked. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Should she call someone? No. There was no one left to call. The door to room 209 was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly. Inside, the room was dim. A single bulb in the corner hummed. The bed was neatly made, untouched. The air smelled faintly of coffee and dust. At first glance, it was just a room. Empty. But then she saw it. On the small desk by the window sat a portable cassette player. Old. Bulky. Next to it, a single cassette tape labeled in marker. Play me. Fallon stared at it, pulse thudding. She picked it up, slid it into the player, and pressed the button. There was static at first. Then a long silence. And then. Funny, isn't it? Eldon's voice. Calm. Clear. You spent years telling me I don't speak up. And now, when I finally do, it's in a language you can't control. She gasped. Her knees buckled slightly, and she dropped onto the edge of the bed. I'm not angry, Fallon. Not really. I'm fascinated. Fascinated by how long you thought you could lie to my face and still sleep in the same bed. I wonder if it ever occurred to you what I'd do if I stopped pretending not to notice. Fallon clutched her chest. The tape went on. I watched. 4 weeks. The late-night messages. The business trips. The lipstick you only wore for him. I watched you turn into someone I didn't recognize. And I said nothing. Because I wanted to know how far you'd go. She wanted to scream, to turn it off. But she couldn't. And now here you are. Still lying. Even to yourself. But that's okay. You'll keep lying. And I'll keep watching. Because I'm not finished yet. The tape clicked. Silence. Fallon sat frozen, her breath shallow, her skin cold. Then, a soft knock at the motel room door. She jumped, heart hammering in her throat. Another knock. Louder. When she opened the door, no one was there. Just a single white envelope on the ground. She picked it up with shaking fingers. Inside was a photo, this time of her, in their bedroom, asleep. Taken the night before. Suddenly, everything twisted. Eldon hadn't disappeared. He had evolved. Quiet, soft Eldon. The man who used to apologize for snoring. Now he was sending her photographs taken from inside her home. And Fallon realized something terrifying. She wasn't being haunted by the past. She was being hunted by it. Fallon didn't sleep that night. She stayed in the motel room long after the tape ended, after the photo cut through her final illusion of safety, after the knock on the door had her stumbling back into the corner like a hunted animal. She didn't return home until dawn. And even then, she sat in the car outside their house for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The front door was still locked. The house looked untouched. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, was still there, watching her movements, studying her fears. Her heart pounded with every creak in the floorboards. She checked the closets. The basement. Under the bed. Nothing. And yet, she wasn't alone. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. Blocked number. One message. No words, just a photo. It was her again. Taken that very morning. She was standing in the kitchen, wearing his hoodie, pouring coffee, staring blankly into the sink. The photo had been taken from outside, through the narrow gap in the window blinds. Fallon dropped the phone. Her lungs refused to fill. She locked every door, every window, drew the curtains, and paced in circles for hours. Then something occurred to her, a memory she hadn't thought about in weeks. The dinner party. The night this all began. Or, more accurately, the night he vanished. She opened her laptop and pulled up the old group chat from their neighborhood circle, half-forgotten messages, birthday reminders, Pinterest recipe spam. Somewhere in the thread, Darla Witherspoon had posted the original invite to the dinner party, including a full guest list. Fallon scanned it. Her heart skipped. Eldon's name wasn't there. Everyone else had confirmed attendance. Fallon had RSVP'd for 2. But his name was missing entirely. She stared at the list, blinking. Somehow, she'd just assumed, like always, that he'd be there. Like a placeholder. A default. But now she saw it differently. He hadn't added himself. He hadn't replied. He hadn't even read the thread. And when she thought back to that night, really thought about it, there was something strange in the way he'd acted. Not hurt. Not surprised. Not confused. No, he had looked, prepared. As if he'd already made up his mind about her before the night even began. As if he had been waiting for her to confirm it. Fallon's fingers trembled as she opened his old desk drawer, the one he always kept locked, until now. Inside, she found exactly what she feared. A list. Handwritten. Folded neatly. It wasn't a to-do list. It wasn't about groceries or home repairs. It was a list of dates and times. Each entry marked by a location. Sometimes vague, sometimes precise. Her gym. The bar near her office. Marshall's gallery. Every place she'd ever gone when she thought Eldon was working late or too tired to join. Next to each entry was a note. Sometimes a time stamp. Other times just a phrase. Red coat, laughing. She touched his hand. Didn't notice me. Again. There were dozens of them. Stretching back over months. Fallon dropped the paper like it burned. She stood still for what felt like hours. Then something caught her eye at the bottom of the list. The final entry. Dated 2 weeks ago. Written in darker ink, as if it had been pressed hard into the page. Dinner party. She chose performance. I chose silence. And beneath that, in a second line, with no date or context. Time to begin. Begin what? Fallon didn't know. But just as the panic started to bloom again, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered with a breathless, hello. Silence. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Not Eldon's. Someone older. You're expected, the man said. Click. The line went dead. She stared at the phone, hands shaking. Her doorbell rang. 3 times. Slowly. Deliberately. She hadn't told anyone she was home. When she looked through the peephole, no one was there. But on the doorstep, wrapped in brown paper, was a single object. An old key. Attached to it, a note. Room 306. It's time you heard his side. She didn't recognize the handwriting. But she knew what it meant. The next part of this nightmare wasn't about what she'd done. It was about what he prepared. And Fallon was starting to understand something horrifying. This wasn't revenge. This was a project. And she was the subject of every chapter. Fallon drove without music. Her hands gripped the steering wheel like she was afraid the car might vanish if she let go. The old key sat in a cup holder, heavy and strange, tied to her with a pull she didn't understand. She didn't know the hotel, there was no name on the note, but something inside her already knew where it was. When she pulled into the lot, the sky was just starting to darken. The place looked like it had grown out of the dirt rather than been built there. Cracked windows, flaking paint, the neon sign buzzing its last breath. And yet, every part of her said she was in the right place. The kind of place where forgotten stories hide in the walls. She walked in through the side entrance. There was no front desk. No check-in. No cameras. No humans. Only a smell, damp, metallic, and faintly sweet, like old paper left in a metal box during summer. Room 306. She found the 3rd floor easily. But the room, it had no number. No plaque. Just a slightly different door, matte instead of glossy, handle worn down from decades of use. She stood in front of it for a long time, staring at the wood grain, heart thudding like footsteps coming from inside her own chest. The key turned effortlessly. Inside, the room was clean. Impossibly clean. White walls, spotless desk, neatly made bed. But on the wall across from the door, pinned in exact symmetry, were photographs. Dozens of them. Fallon stepped closer, jaw slackening. They were all of her. Some recent. Some years old. Some blurry, clearly taken in motion. Others frighteningly precise. One showed her sleeping on the couch with a book on her chest. Another showed her adjusting her skirt in a shop window reflection. A third, one she didn't even remember being real, had her and Marshall standing too close near an elevator, her hand mid-air, as if she'd been about to touch his face. But none of them were angry. None were slashed, vandalized, or cruel. They were catalogued. Each photo had a label underneath it, typed and printed. 0414, coffee, alone, 3 hours, distracted. May 22, gallery exit, denied call, smiled after. 06/09, lipstick shade new, used only for him. July 01, admitted guilt without words. Fallon's knees weakened. She stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the bed. That's when she noticed the journal. It sat on the desk beneath the largest photo, a close-up of her eyes mid-laugh. Fallon's laugh. The one Eldon used to say was his favorite sound. The one he hadn't heard in months. The journal was black, leather-bound, stiff with overuse. She opened it. The first page was a quote. If you stare at a crack long enough, it becomes a canyon. The rest was written in tight, controlled handwriting. Dozens of entries. All about her. Her habits. Her changes. Her lies. But it wasn't hateful. It read like something between grief and science. As though he'd been documenting the death of a belief. Each entry was methodical. She doesn't wear my shirts anymore. When she lies, she touches her necklace. She checks the mirror twice before seeing him, once when seeing me. I think she still wants to love me. But I've made it too easy not to. Fallon read until her vision blurred. Then she turned to the last entry. It was dated yesterday. Tomorrow I stop being an observer. She won't understand it. That's the point. If a man is hollow long enough, eventually, the echoes turn into words. And now I want her to hear them. She shut the journal like it might bite her. In the corner of the room, a small TV flickered on, by itself. A grainy image appeared. Her house. Her kitchen. Live feed. She staggered to her feet. On screen, her phone was still on the counter. And then, movement. A figure appeared. Calm. Unrushed. It was Eldon. He stood in her kitchen, staring at the place where she had stood just hours earlier. Then he walked out of frame. Fallon screamed and turned toward the door. But taped to the inside, where she hadn't seen it before, was another note. Come home, Fallon. We haven't finished dinner. Fallon drove back home in near hysterical silence. The key was still in her pocket. The smell of that room, of sterilized fear and control, clung to her like smoke. Eldon's note, come home, Fallon. We haven't finished dinner. Was tucked under the passenger seat, as if putting it out of sight could mute the dread it poured into her spine. She felt like she was driving straight into a trap, and the worst part. She wasn't being forced. She chose to go. Her hands were slick on the steering wheel. Her thoughts bounced between that surveillance feed and the journal pages she couldn't unread. He had been watching her for months. Not just in passing. Not like someone peeking at texts. He had become her shadow, silent, strategic, invisible. Eldon, the soft man. Eldon, the harmless one. The one she used to joke would get lost in a Home Depot and apologize to a mannequin for bumping into it. That Eldon was dead. She didn't know who this new man was. The house was dark when she pulled in. No lights. No signs of entry. The porch light was off, though she knew she'd left it on before leaving. Every part of her screamed to leave. Drive away. Go to the police. Go to anyone. But instead, she walked in. The front door creaked like it hadn't moved in years. She stepped inside cautiously, flicking on the hallway light. It worked. Nothing seemed out of place. The kitchen was clean. The hallway rug was aligned. The air smelled faintly of lemon, like it always did when Eldon had been anxious cleaning. But the sense of normalcy was almost worse. It was suffocating. On the dining table sat a single plate. Her favorite meal. Perfectly arranged. Still warm. Across from it, an empty chair. And in front of that chair, his old tape recorder. A new cassette already loaded. Labeled. Main course. Fallon's breath caught in her chest. She sat down. She pressed play. Eldon's voice again. But this time, it was lower. Slower. Measured, like he was holding back a tide of something that wanted to pour out. You looked me in the eye that night, he began. Right after you made that joke about me being a mannequin. Right after everyone laughed. You looked at me with this soft, sad smile, like I should be grateful you hadn't gone further. Like it was a favor. Fallon closed her eyes. You didn't know I'd already seen the texts. The late-night meetups. The client meetings with Marshall that never showed up on your calendar. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because I still believed you'd stop. That you'd realize how far you'd drifted. That you'd remember me. She opened her eyes, throat dry. But instead, you stopped saying goodnight. You stopped laughing at my dumb impressions. You stopped seeing me as a person. I was a couch cushion. A coffee table. Something that lived in the house but didn't exist in it. Fallon tried to stop listening, but she couldn't. So I stopped trying to be seen. And I started seeing you instead. Really seeing you. Watching the lies tighten. Watching you become someone I wouldn't recognize in a photograph. And you know what hurt most? Not the cheating. Not the secrets. There was a pause. Just long enough to be unbearable. What hurt most was how easy it was for you to turn me into a ghost. And how good you got at pretending I had died. The tape clicked off. Fallon sat frozen. Then, the hallway light flicked off. On its own. A moment later, she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from upstairs. She stood, heart punching her ribs, and grabbed the nearest object, Eldon's old lamp. She moved toward the staircase, gripping the base like a weapon. The steps creaked above. Then stopped. Silence. Eldon, she called, her voice trembling. No answer. She climbed. Each step felt like a mile. The upstairs hallway was pitch black. She reached for the light switch, nothing. Dead. She took a shaky step forward, past the guest room, past the linen closet, toward their bedroom door, which was wide open. Inside, the moonlight cast pale lines across the bed. And written on the mirror in red marker were 4 chilling words. You're finally paying attention. Fallon dropped the lamp. The sound shattered the silence. And then she saw it, on the bed. Another photo. It was her again, this time, from behind. Standing at the motel. Entering room 306. Taken only hours earlier. She turned to run, only to see the hallway door slowly swing shut by itself. And from behind it, a whisper. Let's talk. Fallon's breath caught mid-throat as the bedroom door eased shut with a slow, almost ceremonial finality. The whisper, let's talk, was still echoing in her ears like it had been stitched into the silence. She stood frozen, the shadows stretching toward her like fingers, her heartbeat pounding loud enough to drown out rational thought. But then came the unmistakable sound behind her, the scrape of wood on wood. A drawer sliding open. She turned toward the noise, every nerve firing, expecting to see Eldon. But the room remained empty. The noise had come from her nightstand. Inside was a notebook. Not hers. Not Eldon's journal either. This was something new. It was thinner. Rougher. Pages filled with torn scraps, taped receipts, doodles that meant nothing, until they did. Fallon sat down slowly and turned the first page. At the top, written in frantic scrawl. Things I wanted to say but didn't. Her eyes darted across the page. Every line was like swallowing broken glass. I hated how you smiled at your phone more than at me. I knew you were lying when you said you worked late. You made me feel like a stranger in my own bed. I started sleeping on the couch because your silence felt louder than my presence. I still made you breakfast. You never ate it. I cried in the garage once so you wouldn't hear me. You never noticed I was gone. I missed you even when you were in the same room. She flipped the pages faster, eyes burning. Each line was worse than the last. This wasn't a journal. It was a graveyard of every word Eldon had buried to keep the peace. And now the silence was cracking open like a fault line. Then, something new, a map. Hand-drawn, childlike, but shockingly precise. It was a layout of their home. Every room marked. Every hallway. Even the creaky stair on the third step. Fallon's hand hovered over it as she noticed something strange. A square drawn behind the wall in the upstairs hallway closet. A note beside it. If she won't listen, maybe she'll see. Her stomach dropped. She threw open the closet and pushed through coats, boxes, old towels, until her hand met something hard behind the drywall. The panel gave slightly. Hollow. She pulled it loose. Behind it was a hidden compartment. Inside, a phone. Eldon's old phone. The one he claimed he had lost months ago. Dead. Dusty. But still intact. She took it downstairs and plugged it in, hands shaking. As soon as it powered up, her screen flooded with missed calls, unsent drafts, and dozens of recorded voice memos. The most recent one, dated only 3 nights ago, was labeled. For Fallon. If she ever bothers. She hesitated. Then pressed play. Eldon's voice filled the kitchen. Not angry. Not cold. Just, tired. You know what the hardest part was? Not the betrayal. Not even the loneliness. It was how invisible I became. Like I had to compete with the version of me in your head, the one you rolled your eyes at. I was never allowed to evolve. I was your past while you auditioned futures. Fallon closed her eyes. Her hands were trembling again. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be heard. So I created silence big enough to echo in. The recording ended with one final line that cut through the kitchen like a blade. You don't get to choose when someone stops loving you. You only notice when it's already too quiet to matter. Fallon collapsed into a chair, numb. But as she stared at the wall, something in her peripheral vision changed. The dining table had something new. Another plate. And beside it, still warm, sat her untouched glass of wine from the night of the dinner party. But it was impossible. She had cleaned that night. Washed everything. Packed it away. Hadn't she? Or had someone been recreating it? Piece by piece. Fallon moved to the window and looked out onto the street. It was empty. Completely still. Until her porch light flicked on. She turned around. On the table where the wine had just been sat a new object. A photograph. This time, it wasn't of her. It was of Eldon, sitting in a chair in a dark room. His face was half-shadowed. But his eyes were sharp, awake, alive in a way she hadn't seen in years. On the back of the photo, a message. The end starts when you stop pretending. Are you ready yet? Fallon's hands began to shake violently. Because that wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. And tomorrow was the last day. The morning air tasted like something new. Something real. Fallon sat on the front steps of her house, the sun barely rising, casting soft shadows across the street. She hadn't slept. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel hunted. Or cornered. Or trapped in the ghosts of her own actions. Because sometime after midnight, everything changed. She'd expected chaos. A final twist. A confrontation. Maybe even Eldon himself, waiting in some dark room with all his photographs and taped monologues. But instead, what she found when she followed the last note, taped to the inside of their fridge, was a letter. Handwritten. Pages long. No drama. No venom. Just truth. In it, Eldon told her that he was done living as a man waiting to be noticed. That he had spent so many years shrinking himself down to something palatable, predictable, easy, not out of weakness, but out of love. And then, one day, he realized that love had become a performance. He was playing a character in a marriage where the script was always written for someone else. He didn't leave to punish her. He left to rediscover himself. To stop being a ghost in his own story. Fallon cried harder reading that letter than she had through all the nights of silence, all the surveillance, all the fear. Because it wasn't a declaration of war. It was an obituary for a version of their marriage that should have ended long before that dinner party. And yet, at the end, there was something else. A chance. A note of hope. He wrote. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking to be found. I just want you to be honest, for the first time, with yourself. Not for me. For you. If you ever truly want to talk, not perform, not defend. I'll be at the house on Elmview. The one we said we'd fix up someday but never did. No letters. No riddles. Just a table. 2 chairs. And this time, we eat dinner together. Fallon drove there just after sunrise. The house was quiet. Empty looking from the outside. She nearly turned back twice. But when she stepped onto the creaky porch and opened the door, there he was. Eldon. Sitting at the table. He looked different. Healthier. Lighter. Still sad, but present in a way he hadn't been in years. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He just nodded toward the other chair. And Fallon sat down. They didn't speak for minutes. Just sat. Breathing the same air. Sharing the same space again without masks or expectations. Then, finally, he said, "Are you ready to stop pretending?" And she nodded. Not everything was fixed that day. They didn't hug. They didn't declare eternal love. But they talked. For real. They unpacked the mess. The silence. The hurt. The part they both played in killing something that once had meant everything. Fallon didn't expect forgiveness. And Eldon didn't offer it. But when they stood up, he walked her to the door. And he said, gently, maybe one day, we build something new. Not from the ruins. From the truth. And she believed him. Thank you for joining us on Reddit Confessions. What did you think about this story? Have you ever experienced a moment where one sentence changed everything in your life, good or bad? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one of them. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss more powerful true stories like this one. We'll see you next time.